Thank you.
Leah Blitzstein, present. Leah Mulhern, present.
Dan Schultz, present. We have Ms. Henry.
Pam Henry, present.
Ross Whiting, present. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy, Ms. Mulhern. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the motion passes. We have a stacked agenda tonight, and so before I turn it over to Ms. Savage, I just want to say thank you to Ms. Janan, Dr. Robinson, Mr. Lytle, Mr. Taylor for being here this evening. I know you are giving up an evening and you've been here for a while. We are looking forward to what you have to say. Thank you for being here. Ms. Savage.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us for our Educational Affairs Committee meeting this Tuesday, October 15th. This evening, we actually have quite a few agenda items that we will be discussing, but first we will ground ourselves as we normally do in our vision and our mission statement, making sure that we acknowledge that part of what we want to do in the district is to make sure that all of our students and our staff and our community feel as though they are belonging, becoming, and excelling. Really thinking about our vision statement, making sure that our students acknowledge and grow into belonging, engaging, and seeking justice as they are with us and when they leave us as well. And the mission statement of Cheltenham School District is to provide inspiration and resources to every student to achieve academic excellence and pursue their highest potential by creating an equitable and inclusive community that fosters social and emotional well-being and a passion for learning. Just very important for us to always start with that because a lot of the work that we ground ourselves in, a lot of the work that we do is grounded in our vision and our mission. So tonight, we actually are going to talk about our draft academic calendars. We will also talk about continuous school improvement, in particular, revisiting the work that we did last year and talking about the work that we will do this upcoming year as we are currently in the 24-25 school year. And we will hear from our K-4 elementary school principals today, who will talk about their school targets and their action plans. So I will pause there. Any questions about the agendas, adjustments that you would like us to make? All right. So we have an exciting topic to start with. We actually are going to preview draft academic calendars for the upcoming school year. And I did want to just surface with the Educational Affairs Committee that we initially were talking about doing draft calendars for 2 upcoming school years. Given where we are in the process, we tonight are going to present 4 drafts for just 1 year because there have been a lot of things moving, particularly in terms of holidays for the 25-26 school year. So we wanted to just update you with that. So per board policy, we have convened an academic calendar committee, and it is made up of a number of different stakeholders from our community, including parents, leadership from community groups, some of our union leadership as well, central office administrators, and school-based administrators. We first met on October 10th, and we reviewed quite a few of the requirements and guidelines, both from board policy, but also from our Pennsylvania Department of Education. And we considered concerns that have been raised by some of our stakeholders around the current calendar through conversations that parents have had with me in particular around, different aspects of the calendar that have been problematic for them. We also took a look at some draft calendars, and those draft calendars came from our stakeholders, but also we looked at current calendars from surrounding school districts as well, just to have a sense of like what our neighbors were really doing with their calendars. So the concerns that have been expressed by a few of the stakeholders that attended this meeting on the 10th were around half days, being a challenge for families in particular, the idea of establishing a routine for students. Our high school staff in particular raised questions about the amount of assessments for our high school students in May as compared to the amount of time that they're actually in the building. Culturally responsive calendar planning is a must, and making sure that we're honoring the cultures of our students in our community, and then balancing professional development time with instructional time for students. The calendar committee did come to some agreements in that October 10th meeting that we thought were be pertinent to the drafts that you will see and also to the conversation tonight. We wanted to make sure that we aligned the assessment calendar, report card calendar, and the PD calendar simultaneously. So that is a conversation that we are internally going to have in the education office to make sure our calendars overlay this calendar appropriately. Really, we want to prioritize what's best for students, and everyone seemed to agree that an August start date was the best option. People like that and they prefer it. We also talked about adding transition days for relevant grades, rising kindergarten, 5th and 9th graders. Although we did not get into the details of whether we tack those on to the very beginning of the school year and not have other students come in, or whether those are separate days in the summer, but that is something that was raised. We also discussed plans to gather feedback and to create some level of communication plan. What the current plan is to actually send a survey out to our school community and our families in the next week or so that we can keep it open for about 3 weeks and gain feedback based upon the conversation and the drafts this evening. We would like to convene a focus group with some of the students on the superintendent student council and really talk to some of the high school students around like whether this feels like a good rhythm to them in terms of the calendar. And then have some additional focus groups with families and some of our community stakeholders. And make sure that we're able to address the concerns that have been raised as calendars have shifted. And we also want to make sure that we're very clear with families around, what this process is, but also nailing down what the process would be if we have to shift in the future, and also making sure that people are aware of the calendar prior to the end of the school year so that they can plan appropriately. So I'm going to next share a spreadsheet with you, and in the spreadsheet, you'll see that these draft calendars have August start dates, and they attempt to structure breaks more appropriately. They do include professional development time, both full days and half days. But the thing that's interesting about these calendars is they introduce a full week off for Thanksgiving. Traditionally, what is happening this current school year, our students will come in on Monday, I believe, for a half day, and then they're off for the rest of the week. So this was an attempt to actually correct that. And you will see in these calendars that there are a number of breaks, things that we want to honor in particular. Feel free to get up and take a look. I know it's smaller. Maybe I'll bring it up and I'll take you through each one kind of like chunk by chunk. So this is draft A.
Sorry.
Yeah, they should be.
Yeah, that's up.
Good.
It just says I need access.
It needs- in particular, you'll see for the majority of our calendars, we still have induction in August, and then we have 3 professional development days with a vacation day. The other thing that you will see is Rosh Hashanah is in September. We attempted for this draft calendar to back a professional development day in so that students would have 5 straight days off, including that weekend. That way they wouldn't have 2 days off and then come in on Monday and have 2 more days off. We did honor in October Yom Kippur. And this calendar in particular has half-day Fridays or a half day prior to an extended break. So this in particular would move half-days from Wednesdays to Fridays. You also see here that we have a full week for Thanksgiving, but the report card conferences would actually be the first 2 days. That's a mistake because that should be a half day just for teachers. But making sure too that we honored that full break because we don't want students just to come in for just a few hours that week. Either we give them all of the time off or we don't. In December, we see here that they have Christmas break, winter break, excuse me, not Christmas break. Winter break that actually starts on Wednesday, the 24th, and it goes through the full following week so that students and staff wouldn't come in on Friday, the 2nd. You also see that there's a professional development day the Friday before Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service. So there would be a 4-day weekend there. Same thing with President's Day here, professional development. And then there would be a 4-day weekend due to President's Day. And in March, we have Eid and we have a parent-teacher conference the Friday before that. And on this calendar, there's actually a full week for spring break. In May, we actually have a professional development day on the day before Election Day, because the other thing to note is election days on this calendar are actually schools and offices closed. And that gives teachers the opportunity, staff, families, the opportunity to actually participate in voting. And from there, you see that school would end on Friday, June 12th, with our professional development days for teachers falling on the following Monday and Tuesday. So there's a different rhythm to this calendar because the breaks are a little more succinct. And with the Friday half days, moving to the end of the month, you see that there's a more continuous method, I guess, more continuous blocks of time that students would be in. So I will pause there. Questions? Yes.
So thank you, sorry. I don't wanna lose the half day or the early dismissal Fridays that are there and before break. Does that mean all of the half days that are before a break, Friday or not, those orange days, are those professional development days like the Wednesdays? 'Cause right now the half days before a break are not, they're just early release for everyone.
Correct.
But, okay, I just wanted to
Yes.
clarify that. Okay, so anything you see in orange, right, is a half day, students leave, staff is
Stays.
doing, okay,
Yes.
that's what I'm doing. Thank you.
So first of all, I really want to applaud you for just creating this as a process. Maybe it's been done before, but I haven't seen stakeholders be involved. I've only been on the board for a year, but as a community member, I haven't seen this process be transparent. I really appreciate it. And then, on behalf of families who would like to have a say in our calendar, I love it. I have a question, I guess, concern about moving half days to Fridays in terms of attendance. So that's sort of one concern for me. And I know that we want to encourage, staff attendance at PD, all PD, before a holiday feels hard. And like when we want to have their attention the most, it feels hard. So just putting that's sort of my comment to that, but I really appreciate the thoughtfulness and all the factors. I know that there are so many factors. You were not going to please everybody on every count. So thank you.
Absolutely. And you will see in some additional drafts, like the next one, which is draft B, these still do keep the Wednesday PD days.
Got it.
So what we attempted to do was provide different options just based upon, the feedback and to see if we could actually lay them out into a school year calendar, given all of the constraints and requirements.
Meta question, and actually first, +1 to the thank you. For the record, the calendar committee did exist in the past and did involve communities to not to detract.
It is not a new. It's not new to me.
No, understand it. I'm not trying to play understand now. The feedback you're looking overall, the board will be voting on one of these. This evening, are you hoping for us to give you by the end, to give you a signal on which you're leaning towards, or is it just general feedback and then you all would take that and present a final recommendation?
Actually, that's in the deck as well, because we will, reading my mind tonight, we will take your feedback from this evening and we will reconvene the academic calendar committee and make refinements so that we can reduce the number of drafts and hopefully come up with something we can bring back into November's educational affairs committee. And at that point, you can give us a yay or nay to move forward.
Thank you. And you answered it, but rather than make assumptions, in draft A, The Wednesday PDs there would no longer be half days on Wednesdays.
Correct. And
At all.
they
It
would
will always
move to
be these
Fridays.
Fridays.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
I have one more. Just comment about Rosh Hashanah, the 3-day block there. Just as a family that observes and would potentially use that time to travel to see family. And as someone who has also a staff member in my family in the district as well, who would want to attend PD, obviously, but would also want to visit with family, like the kids are off from school, then we would want to go. Just something to think about, another wrench.
That's a great point.
Ms. Loman?
Just a question about the holidays for religious observances. Does any one of these calendars consider giving off for Muslim holidays or Diwali or any other holidays along those?
This calendar actually does give off for Eid al-Fitr, which is on March 20th. And you'll see that the parent-teacher conference day is the day prior. So essentially, students would have a 4-day weekend that weekend. We gave off for the Jewish holidays, and for the Muslim holidays, we have not looked at any of the other holidays.
Okay.
But we could if the board wanted us to consider doing so.
Thank you.
Just to add on to that, I would look into demographics of what our population celebrates and doesn't, if we can. I don't know if we have
Yes.
access to that information, but I don't.
And that can absolutely be part of the family survey that goes out, because the family survey, the way that we envision structuring it is really asking families, like, what do you value in a calendar and what days off would you need, those kinds of questions. It's gonna be less an exercise like we have right now, where we're actually looking at drafts, but more around like, what are your real concerns as a family and what are your non-negotiables in terms of making sure that your children are family. So draft B is a very similar calendar. Go back up to the top. But the difference with draft B is here you see in September in particular, the PD day has disappeared, but we do still have a Rosh Hashanah off. And we have restored on this calendar the Wednesday PD days, and they occur on a pretty regular cycle. You will see here in November that we have 2 PD days in November because, again, we have given off for election day. And here you see that the students would actually be off the full week. In December, we still have our truncated winter break where we have to come in for the first 2 days. And the rest of the calendar pretty much tracks except for those Wednesday PD days being different. Next, we have a draft C. We got really into this. So we did. In draft C, you see that here we have the PD day in September that was in draft A is no longer here, but we have in this calendar, the Friday PD days again being half days, early dismissal days. But what's different about this schedule, if you go down into March in particular, you see that this is a 5-day break because we have 2 parent report card conference days here. And we do have the full actual spring break here as well. And again, giving off for primary voting day, but still having the PD day right before Memorial Day. Students still able to be dismissed on June 12th. Yes,
Are snow days built into any of
we considered that. And at the bottom of the calendars, we actually did not include snow days. We plan to do a flexible instruction day application this year for next year. So we would be able to use a flexible instruction day in case of inclement weather and actually, instead of having to actually call an inclement
Right.
weather day. And if we did have to actually tack on additional days, we would do it at the end of the school year and add days to the end of the school year instead of subtracting days off. Just hearing concerns around, how families are having to plan for care months in advance for summer camp. Because apparently that's a real thing.
Yep.
Like a real thing.
So there's no padding
There's no
in
pattern.
terms of required Ds.
Correct.
Okay.
And then our draft D, this is the draft that actually has 2 full weeks for winter break. So you see, yeah. So we actually were able to start on the same day. We did not give the PD day in September, but with the way we were able to work Thanksgiving, you would get the 2 PD days off in November with the full week for Thanksgiving. Then students would have 2 full weeks for winter break. And we would have the same 4 days, 3 days here because there's 2 parent-teacher conference days, a full week for spring break, but you see, it's a very different end date. So the students would get out later in the school year. We considered a couple of possibilities and some things to suggest could be shortening some of the breaks, shortening spring break, because in all 4 of these models, we have a full spring break. It's really dependent upon what the feedback is. This was a good exercise for our internal team because we recognize now that we're able to build the calendar in multiple ways and trying to keep within the parameters of all the requirements, but we are still trying to problem solve for concerns that have been raised. We can also move those, half-day dismissal days around. We can add, we can truncate, because luckily we have more hours of instruction than we typically would see in most school districts. I saw Leah.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I did not count, but the first 2, A and B, seem to retain a higher number of the half-day PD days than draft C and D.
Correct.
Okay, so that's fairly new for us to have as many as we do now, which I know is part of the concern from families, is what it sounds like you were hearing. But I'm just curious what that will look like in terms of I know that there's been excitement about having this time to use it for PD, very, planned very carefully and thoughtfully. So I'm just curious to see where that will go. And then I guess the only other thing I was going to comment on is it looks like in all of the calendars, the Friday before Labor Day is gone.
Yes.
That's a school day now. And the other thing I noticed was that Easter Monday, or the Monday after Easter, is not in any of these full week. This coming year, I think, is the first year we've had Easter Monday off, and my understanding was that came from the calendar, from a committee and surveys of people wanting Easter Monday after the year before having the truncated spring break that people said they wanted, and then it turned out in reality no one really liked. So anyway, and not so much a question as just kind of some comments, just as we do the further committee meetings, the surveys, just trying to, I want to make sure that people understand the differences and
Absolutely.
Anyway, and sometimes you don't know whether you like something till you live it, I know. So that's, we'll see. Maybe people won't like the Monday off this year. I don't know. We won't know till April.
How about that? Thank you so much.
Sort of piggybacking off on that question, would the PLC, like the time that the Wednesdays are being used for now for PLCs, would that continue on the Friday half days?
Yes, hopefully.
Okay.
Because the thought is, like, currently right now, in the months that we actually have 2 half days, one day the principals within the buildings have a faculty meeting, and they also have some level of training that either we support from central office based upon their request, or it's focused around some level of in-building meeting, MTSS, PBIS, something of the sort. On the other Wednesday, central office typically arranges professional learning based upon what the initiatives and the priorities for the year have been. The full day PDs, we typically from central office set up the logistics for, and we deploy. This year we have had a heavy focus on continuous school improvement, which you'll hear about next, and also on, making sure that our teachers are digesting curriculum.
So the thought is to still have some time for the PLCs or,
Yes.
okay.
I had a couple thoughts. The first was, I don't know what's fact and fiction, but in the past calendar conversations, some things have been said about numbers of days before standardized testing being a consideration. I was curious whether that actually moves the needle we found or not. Because it strikes me that some of the ones that end further into the summer would presumably mean we're having fewer days before the actual tests.
You are correct about that.
What are your thoughts on whether that is a consideration?
I think it is a consideration, and I think particularly the continuity of the days prior to the actual PSSA and the Keystones. The Keystones are different though, because they come on multiple windows, but the PSSAs in particular kind of fluctuates when the state opens the window, but it is something to think about and plan for. We typically don't know until, I guess, the fall prior, when the PSSA is actually fully going to be scheduled for, and we start setting up then our assessment.
I imagine there's a reason for the uncertainty, but it seems like one of those things you can really plan ahead on the state side. Oh, well, we could talk to our state rep about pushing for that. The other question is around learning loss over the summer and learning, I don't know, is there a phenomenon of learning loss over winter break and longer winter breaks? This last calendar, for instance, has a longer winter break, but presumably a shorter summer break as a result.
Yes. There's a whole calculation where you can measure a child's regression over long breaks. And we hear people talk about it most often in special education realms, but it actually applies to all students. And it is something to consider. And I think the bigger question for our community is, like, our teachers actually have 190-day school year in their collective bargaining agreement. So how do you stretch that or shrink it based upon the breaks so that you actually are looking at how long or short a summer break is, for example? And I think that that's a delicate balance, because you have to consider the interest of multiple stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. The other comment, we didn't talk about it in the most recent calendar conversation, but when we introduced the second Wednesday, there was some discussions around, from an equity lens, making sure families had affordable childcare options made available. I know we received an email kind of highlighting that those childcare options aren't necessarily ideal for students with special needs. And so I just wonder if, as part of the survey or the presentation that incorporates more half days, if we can maybe include some thought around what supports we're providing families with diverse student needs. And also for just what we already have in place, reiterating, hey, I'm not trying to say $20 is not a lot, but it's not totally unaffordable for a family to be able to lean into just having those half days covered. Sorry, one last, this is a question that I actually don't want an answer now, for reasons that will be obvious, which is, I'm curious whether the contract has any, the teacher's contract, if all of these would fit into it, if there'd be any changes that need to be made, that we should be considering as a district as well.
I can tell you that we built this based upon the current contract.
Great,
Yes.
thank you.
And we actually did invite, representation leadership from each of our collective bargaining units. So they contributed to this conversation as well, and their feedback was phenomenal. Great partners in the process.
That's great.
At this point, I will invite public comment. If we have anybody from the community who would like to comment, please state your name, where you're at in the township. I don't see we have any chat. And I look out and see all administrators.
No chance.
Ms. Savage, Dr. Pimental.
And that really concludes, the review of the draft calendars. I just wanted to make sure that you understood the differences, right? Those Wednesdays versus Friday half days, the differences in the different breaks, in particular winter break. And then for discussion, and the way that we've been approaching this as an academic calendar committee is making sure that we elevate what people like about the calendars, thinking about what they don't like and what non-negotiables are. So the plan is next to really take back your feedback to the academic calendar committee. And we'll take a look at the drafts that we've come up with. We'll adjust those drafts out and refine them. We will send the survey out, and then we will come back with hopefully what will be similar to either a final draft or maybe 2 drafts for you to choose from for November for the Educational Affairs Committee meeting, so that you can actually take a further look with the intent that we present a academic calendar for the board in the December meeting or next week. All right, any additional questions? Thank you. And next we were going to move to Dr. Pimental.
Hey, good evening, everyone. So we're sliding into our discussion around continuous school improvement and what that work looks like at this particular point, as also as partially as a setup for the principals and what they're going to be presenting shortly. So for starters, taking us back more than a year, we started our work with Victoria Bernhardt's organization, Education for the Future Initiative. And she is essentially the preeminent expert on continuous school improvement methodologies and research. So our partnership is with them. They're a nonprofit organization, and they've provided us with a lot of the initial professional development and a lot of the anchor texts and support around community surveys as well, in order to get and generate information specifically around perceptions, which I'll show in a moment. And so this is essentially sort of a quote unquote famous quote, if you will, from Victoria Bernhardt, which is, if our only school improvement strategy is to react negatively to test results, anything not quote unquote tested is marginalized. And for anyone who's worked in the education field, especially in places where there's a heavy emphasis on student academic performance alone, this is absolutely a true statement. And so a lot of Bernhardt's work is around creating a data-centric methodology to improve schools that doesn't fall into this trap, is essentially what the work is about. And so this graphic you see on the right is, and I guess I put this in air quotes, but it's famous. In our little world, it's famous anyway, which is a specific way of being able to be users of data, but to do it in a way that doesn't fall into that trap just mentioned a moment ago. So the way to do that is to have these 4 essential buckets of information that we can look at and cross-reference with each other. So student performance is a part of that. It's obviously very important that how are students learning, what are they learning? They're learning all the skills that they need to relative to their age and the state standards. That's an essential part of the work of school. So that's a part of this. Perception data. So we look at the perceptions of students and staff and families, and taking all that information into an account when considering and looking at the things that are going on in our schools. Demographic data, which some of that is sort of the obvious that you think of when you think of demographic data, but also looking at things like special education rates, exactly what the categories of special ed designations are and what those look like over time. Do we see, an increase in the number of students who were giving IEPs for a specific purpose or cause, ELL students, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of information that gets included in student demographics to have a picture of the students that are showing up to school. And then lastly, school process and procedures is also data. It's not data in the form of graphs and charts like you might think of, but it's a look at how we function and operate as a school. So what does our MTSS process actually look like in reality? That's a data point. What is our system for recording student interactions or behaviors in the classroom and in the hallways. That's a data point. So all of that gets incorporated into school process and procedures. So the function of all this then is to be able to look at the trials and tribulations that various schools might be facing and to look at that problem and say, now let's evaluate the problem through these 4 lenses and not just a single lens. So your concern may very well be, I'm concerned about second graders' reading levels. That's a perfectly fine concern to show up to the table with. Then the question would be, how do we cross-reference that to try to create a clearer picture about what's going on with the students? So you might find that the students who are performing the worst on those exams are also the same students who report the lowest sense of belonging in the school. So you're starting to create a richer picture about, well, what is our problem actually? Is it an English instruction problem or is it a belonging problem? Or maybe it's both. But you want to be able to start to create something other than just how can we attack the standardized tests yet even harder, which isn't to say that you don't need to do that, but how can we start to cross-reference that with other things? So that's kind of a primer or a re-look at this, which I know many of you have seen this before. So then the essential process, and this is what the principals will be sharing with you. So I'll start with this and then just give a little bit more information, and then we'll invite the principals up. So the continuous school improvement process is there are 4 components to it when you're thinking about it as a procedure. So the first part of your procedure, when you know you have a problem, is to figure out what is that root cause. And the example I just gave is where you would look at the 4 buckets of data and use that as your methodology to determine what is the root cause of this problem that we're having. Students aren't performing as well as we would like in English. What's the root cause of that? And you go to work looking at the data, looking at anecdotal information, and trying to determine the root cause. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is what's called program vision. That's saying we know we have a problem, we know why the problem exists. Now we want to look into the future and craft a narrative of what a better future would look like and to articulate that clearly. Because a lot of times people have different visions for what that future might look like. So it's a process of walking people through the experience of vision creation. Let's create a better tomorrow and articulate it. Then the third part is, now we have a wonderful vision for the future. How are we actually going to get there? Let's create an action plan. And then lastly, what is our success criteria up front? And that's a 2-part component. Number 1, what are the exact data points that we're going to look at on what date? And ahead of time, we are marking what the measures are going to be, whether or not we are moving towards success at the rate we're hoping, not at the rate we're hoping, not at all. You want to set that ahead of time so that you're not at the end of that process and then deciding, was this a success or not? You need to determine that upfront. And so that's that last component. So as the principals are sharing their plans with you, this is the process that they'll be walking through. And you can see some of these have more than one component to it, but those 4 big buckets are the piece. And just as a side note, you'll notice that no one has the last one filled out because that's not until the end of the year. So then the next piece to bring in is sort of where we are in this process. So one of the things that we've very much benefited from, for those of you on the board who've been with us through this CSI process, you know that last year we did a huge lift around professional development and educating literally every teacher in the district to become partners in this work. And then as we've started to implement this, something that Ms. Savage has been able to bring in with her experience is a very targeted view around implementation science and how to sort of move us into the next step. And so part of that direction is that starting in the summer, we started building small teams around specific challenges in all of the schools, and to have those teams become essentially sort of the beta testers for how to implement this at a very high quality level so that they can then share out with their peers, and then we can start to build more teams at the school and to start to build out the number of teams solving different problems at each of the schools. So the eventual end goal is that we have many CSI processes happening at all the schools. Right now we have 1, and that's sort of our beta test. So what the principals will be sharing with you today is that 1 team who's been working since the summer to start to implement a solution to a problem.
Any questions? Right. Next, we have Dr. Reilly. He is going to describe for us the data that is actually contained in the slides so that you have a sense of like where this data comes from.
Just to piggyback off of Dr. Pimental, principals will be presenting the CSI plan as the wrap up to the data slides that we'll look at. And so while we are considering multiple measures, we also have to think about the statewide performance goals or measures that we are handed to us from the Pennsylvania Department of Education, who is taking the lead from the U.S. Department of Education through the Every Student Succeeds Act. Couple different factors that we're looking at here. First of all, school performance based on statewide testing, PSSA's keystones. Tonight, since it's just K4, we'll only be talking about or looking at PSSA test in grades 3 and 4. One thing I kind of skipped over here in terms of Future Ready Index is the reporting platform where all of this data is publicly available. We're not sharing the data that will end up on Future Ready because that data has not yet been released. And so there is a bit of a lag with the Future Ready dashboard, because if we were to open that up now and use that data, it's from 22-23. So we're going to be sharing data from 23-24 as the most recent form of data that we have. Also on Future Ready, you see a number of other indicators besides just academic performance. United States Department of Ed requires 6 different indicators. PA has 12 different indicators. If you were on Future Ready, you would see those 6 indicators marked as federal that are required by USDE. But then you can also scroll through and see all 12 indicators for Pennsylvania. We're not looking at all 12 indicators tonight. Some of those indicators, though, are statewide average in terms of performance on those PSSAs, as well as a statewide goal. This goes back to Every Student Succeeds and a 2033 goal now. When this first started, it wasn't 2033, it was 2030. They've added additional years to that as a result of COVID. And we'll talk a little bit about where the numbers come from that we'll look at as our targets when we move forward, because we have both accountability indicators as well as yearly interim targets that the state provides for us. They do that on a statewide basis, as well as school-specific targets. A lot of times they are the same until you get into the subgroup data. We'll take a look at that as well. Just for this current school year, the interim targets from the state, across the state for ELA, 71.5% is the pass rate. So number of students or percent of students who are proficient and advanced on the ELA PSSA, regardless of grade level. And so that is for grades 3 through 8. Mathematics 57.6, science is 74.2. The long-term goal is the 2033 goal. Those numbers are exactly what they were in 2030. They simply changed the year at the top and stretched it out over more years. What we have access to, and actually this particular image comes directly from the PDE website. And so anyone can look at this and see not only the interim state goals across all those years, but they can see those for all of the different subgroups. This is just an example of what ELA looks like. We had this for math, we had this for science, we had this for EL students, we also had this for graduation rate. So there are some of the other indicators that we can see on Future Ready. Just to highlight where we are today. So we just pulled those numbers that I had on the previous slide. That 71.5 comes right from this spreadsheet. While we do track all the data across subgroups, we've talked about Linkit for several years now. All that data is available, disaggregated within Linkit. We are not going to present all of that disaggregated data tonight. When we get into the targets, some things to consider and things that we have to consider as we think about what the state interim targets are versus interim targets that might make more sense for our district and our individual schools. One is just looking at how are our students performing across our classroom diagnostic tools, or what we refer to as a CDT, which is a diagnostic assessment provided to us by the state and aligned to PSSA and state standards. We also look at our historical data as it relates to PSSAs as well as keystones, which we'll address when we have our secondary principles here in November. An important part to consider here as it relates to where's the data starting from, and then mapping that out to the 2033 goal and establishing all of those interim goals along the way. The state data comes from the average, 2-year average of the 15-16 and 16-17 school years. And so when we look back, I'll drop back when we look back here, we start with 2018 as the first year that we had an interim goal. And so they used the 2 prior years average to establish what that baseline data and build out to the 2033 goal. That has remained that way from that 2-year average. When we establish our own district goals for our individual schools across the different content areas, we're looking at the most recent data we have in terms of how the schools have performed. So we're adjusting our targets based on the most recent data of how our students are performing. And so what we'll have tonight is the targets that we have for our schools based on last year's performance, and then mapping that out to 2033. One thing to keep in mind as we get to science is that heard about the change in science standards. It's been a 20-year process at the state level. They gave us 3 years. Next year is the full implementation of the new science standards. One thing that has happened is that they are changing the assessment. The assessment is going to be administered to 5th graders this year rather than 4th graders. So last year's 4th graders will take a science PSSA again this year. 8th graders remains the same. And so 5th graders will take a science PSSA, 8th graders will take a science PSSA. They're aligned to the new standards, even though implementation hasn't happened yet, which means there is no accountability for the science standards. There is an expectation of participation, but not accountability. So when we're looking at the targets, they don't make a lot of sense to us because we're assuming 4th grade performance and therefore a 4th grade target. We don't know what that means yet because we're moving that to 5th grade. We don't know what the assessment is going to look like. We've been told that they're changing the style of questions. They're adding technology enhanced items to the science PSSA. It's also aligned, just a little bit of background on steels. They've added a domain in the science standards in environmental literacy and sustainability. They've also added technology and engineering. With that, it's phenomena-based. The questions are supposedly going to be scenario-based and also 3-dimensional in nature. So there's a lot more complexity to the way that science is being assessed. And we have no experience with that yet. The state has not provided guidance on, is that 2033 goal going to change? Are the interim targets going to change? No information yet. And so we're just using the data we have and putting targets out there for the assumption of 4th grade performance. So I just want to lay that out. And when you see the plans from the principal as it relates to science, there's not a lot of information there, except for the fact that we are doing a lot of work around curriculum design, investigation of, or exploration of new resources as it relates to science that align to skills.
And with that, we actually can move into our actual principal presentations. And first up would be ShaVon Elementary School.
I'm not standing this time. I learned. You're not getting that out of me again.
Welcome, Principal Janai.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I am thrilled, and it is very exciting to be here year 2. It makes an absolute huge difference. I just wanted to, just for my own, okay. So very excited to be here on year 2 and to share where we are. And I would say, the first thing was to stabilize the data, to make sure that the data was not, it had been multiple years of declining before I had the pleasure of coming on, and to stabilize that data to make sure we were ready to have a foundation to go up and to improve. So this is really the first year that, you know, having been able to find some growth last year and find some stabilization, this is the first year that we can now implement in year two. Some things that when we're sitting here next year, we see in the year after that we get on path to meet those targets. So the first thing, and I am going to jump to this, is that, when you're looking at our data in ELA and where we are, we're nowhere near where we need to be. Yes, we had a little bit of growth, but when you look at the science data, it's very interesting to me that our science data is where it is, because the science test is mainly reading. And so when we look at why we're not where we need to be in reading, it tells me that our students are not prepared to show what they know in the way that the state is asking them to show it on the test. And the last thing we want to do is teach to a test. So it becomes, how do we prepare students for the test naturally through their day-to-day instruction so they're ready? Because if you ask a student to tell you what the setting of a story is, they can answer that. If you ask the story to say why the author chose to set up this, the setting in this way and what it added to the character's emotions, they're like, well, wait, huh? What do you mean by that? So the first thing that we started, and it literally started this week, is that our students are able to look at questions that are exactly the context in which they are going to see them on the test. And it's not changing the stories they're doing. It's not changing what they're doing in class. It's just, why would we not show it in the way? I'm taking my son to get his driver's license test on Monday. I wouldn't purposely confuse him by not showing him exactly how to parallel park and use the exact language. So that we have set up with our 3rd and 4th grade. I will have more information for you as time goes on, because this was the first week 3rd grade is doing it. One of the things the district did that was so exciting, Fly is very into this, is set up a curriculum map where it's very important. Mr. Epps has 2 wonderful boys in our school, and it's very important that they are getting a similar experience. The teacher still gets to have their own personality. The teacher still gets to build their own classroom culture. But how do we have the same experience in math and reading and science, where the kids are not coming home with completely different contexts of what they're doing during the school day? So the curriculum maps have allowed us now, every teacher is supporting the same piece of grade level content text. And that was a big thing. I had to figure out year one, what are you using? Why are you using it? We found a lot of shockingly, a lot of variation. How do we put that in context? So now I could give the teachers and say, this is the story you're already doing anyway. There's Monday's question, Tuesday's question, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays set up just like PSSA, just add it into what you're already doing. And let's talk about it, do it together. Make it a game. Why are you eliminating this, getting rid of that? So we're doing that both in math and reading, which is very exciting. We're really looking at, I'm going to touch on 2 more points because I know we want to get really down to the CSI. We're really looking at what's happening in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. The best way you prepare students for what they need to show in 3rd grade is what they learn in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd. That foundation is the most important thing. We know that our students exiting in 4th grade now are kind of where we really saw our COVID years and things of that nature. So as we're looking at our K and our 1 and our 2, and we were the first school that adopted Haggerty last year. We were the first school that started sending to other schools, where we got to send to Winco to see what they were doing, to do some things across school-wide. Very excited for that. That our teachers are doing this in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade to really build that foundation. The other thing we're doing is we're really looking at that ESSA vocabulary. If they're going to be using the word generalization on the 4th grade test, we need to be using the word generalization in kindergarten. I was able to identify a kindergarten teacher who naturally does this, and she's kind of acting and it's the quietest one in the group, that you find these little bits of magic in what they're able to do. I've really been able to highlight her and highlight a lot of different teacher practice in that way. The other thing that's very important to us and to me is branding. One of the things I loved about the school when I first got there is their branding to SEL, that we are caring, exceptional, and safe. When you stay with SEL and you stick with SEL, you become very empathetic, but sometimes that empathy can be a barrier. As Ms. Savage will say, rigor is love. And if we are allowing us to stay in the empathy space, we're not getting to the rigor. So one of the things that we did this year, and Mr. Epps should have seen it come home, hopefully, is how are we going to, accept just being caring, exceptional, and safe, how are we going to brand ourselves as scholars? And so it will be introduced after the kids got to nominate words and we sent them home to families to vote, that we are going to be also known as curious, engaged scholars. Not just caring, exceptional, and safe, but what makes us exceptional? We are curious, engaged scholars. Where is the academics in what we do? Where is the focus on that academics as being the primary role that we serve? And that's going to be in part of our rebranding. The other thing, the last thing on these that will be encompassed is that we're creating driven dolphin boards. We know we're the Dolphins. We love that. No hint to I'm an Eagles fan, no hint to the Miami Dolphins in any way, shape, or form, although the coach, absolute riot. That we are driven dolphins. One of the things we need our kids to know is, what is my data? What what level am I on? Why am I on that level? What is my which book do I choose from independently? Which book do I choose from instructionally when someone's going to be working with me? If you ask our students currently, they don't know that. I would challenge you in a few months to come in and find out and ask them these questions, and they should be able to tell you that information. We just are finishing up a contest where teachers got to design driven dolphin boards. Every room is going to get a board where all of the data, all the students start exactly where they are. It doesn't matter if you're the highest in the room or if you're trying to really get that data up, and they're going to see their dolphin rise and it's going to jump, and they'll be comparing them against themselves, because that's what you want to do. We just want to see that growth. It's not about keeping up with the student next to you. It's about seeing that growth. So I know I'm talking very quickly, but all of this is here. Year 2, doing a lot more walkthroughs than I've been able to do before, now that I really understand the climate and the culture. And I'll say, going into to my last 2 minutes on this slide, going into what I think is in a lot of ways the flagship school, and it's the name of the district. I think there's really been a level of trust that's been built between the staff and myself being their servant, because that's how I see myself. And I think year 1's always hard when leadership changes, but I feel welcomed into classrooms. I feel welcomed into discussion. I feel welcomed into being asked, and vice versa. I learned through them, they learned with me, I hope, and that feels just really impactful to do this work. So for CSI, we decided to choose something that is SEL based, but in a very different way. Our students have to be emotionally ready to learn. Otherwise, that becomes your biggest barrier. And kids are going to be kids. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be words that are said that should not be. There's going to be recess incidents. How do we make sure we best support that in the way that our students are getting a systemized approach? So what we looked at is looking at an audit. Less than 30% of teachers last year were doing morning meeting. We saw that our Swiss forms were most of the time happening after lunch or after recess. And we saw that teachers expressed an elevated level of concern where kids were coming to them with challenges after recess, which was interrupting instruction. So the first thing that we did was all teachers are now supporting morning meeting protocols. We switched lunch and recess. Recess now happens first. Lunch happens second, to allow our students to get that energy out, which they need first. And we've seen that there has already been a decrease in our Swiss forms that are happening after lunch and recess. We also now have a 1 to 2 minute breathing exercise that happens every single day after they come back from lunch. That way, the students are not chomping at the bit to talk to the teacher, and they're getting a way to exhale what has maybe just happened, knowing that when you put that many children together in a recess yard in a lunchroom, there's going to be things, no matter how much we try to be engaged and involved. And we also created the morning meeting resources so that everybody has the same experience in a sense, using the same resources were created internally by the team that Ms. Savage. You are just Esquire, Doctor, you were all the things listening to you speak. So we were able to set up a team where we created it from within. We look for resources that were out there. We're not just using a scripted program. We have a group of 4 who come together and create these morning meeting resources themselves for what is best for our school. How's it being measured? I walk around literally every day, and who's doing this, who's not doing it, so it doesn't feel like an I gotcha. And we are at the point now where we have 100% buy-in. Is everybody doing it? Of course not, but everybody's doing it 30 to 100% in less than 6 weeks. That's data. And that now the goal is by November 1st that everybody, because it's just muscle memory. Oh shoot, we played that video. And I keep saying, have a student play the video, have a student ready to do it. By November 1st, everyone will be using that, after lunch mindfulness video. This is the method of monitoring to ensure morning meeting, lunch mindfulness, looking at the Swiss data, looking at how much is turned in. We've already seen a decrease in that. And we will be, how many phone calls are being made to the main office? When are they being made for behavior referrals? What we found, the last thing I'll end with, we were probably looking at 25% of the population was getting some kind of a phone call or referral. I would say we still have phone calls and referrals, but I'd say for it's less than 10% of the population, which is what you want. And those are students we have the emotional support program. They're going to have those chronic day-to-day challenges. It's part of us meeting them where they are. It's where they have a behavior deficit. But the things that are the nuanced behaviors are being eliminated by a lot of what we're putting in place. And that makes them emotionally ready to take in the higher rigor that we are showing them with love. Yes?
Yeah. So we're gonna actually have the committee ask you questions.
Please
prior.
do.
That way.
I am ready.
So if there's any questions.
Questions?
Please.
Just a comment, I sneakily looked at last year's presentation just to see how things changed, and so many things went up. And I know there's probably an intentionality of not necessarily highlighting previous year's scores to this year's because it's individual years improvements, but I just wanted to recognize that everything seems to be moving largely in the right direction, but most importantly, I love the fact that there are such differences in your action plans this year than last year, and it feels like it's getting so much more concrete. I know it's not my lane, but I wanted to just recognize it because it's great to see.
I appreciate that. That was intentional. I'm not serving this table and all of the students if the action plans don't change. Yeah, but thank you for sharing that.
Questions?
Thank you, Michelle. I mean, with this, part that you shared with us, just, like, it seems so simple. We went from 30% of teachers having morning meetings to 100%. That's not, like, it was a huge lift, I'm sure, to get to that point, and that is awesome. And to be able to say, like I said, 6 weeks in, like, we've already accomplished so much, and that is what's gonna, continue you guys on that trajectory of continuous improvement, and it's awesome
I have
to see.
such a rock star team of
Yeah.
teachers, like the love and the dedication. They just needed the resources.
Right.
Once the
Yep.
resources were there.
And doing it together,
They
like doing
jumped
it
right
from
in.
within, and like, and you mentioned, which I always love hearing, when we find the teachers or the staff or whoever it is that has this
Yeah.
one best practice, they have multiple best practice, but that one thing that
Sure.
everyone needs, and they're able to share that, and everyone's learning, from each other. It's awesome. Thank you.
You may have said this, so forgive me. How did you focus in on the morning meetings? I see that you had a school-wide audit, but kind of what brought the morning meetings to the forefront for you as something to focus on?
So I would say the two most important parts of the day are how you start the day, and then during those transitions, and then of course how you end the day. So the start of the day is how it's going to set the tone for absolutely everything else. I would say that was the first thing. The second thing, just looking at the fact that every single room I went to for a lot, everybody was doing something differently. And so when teachers are left to their own devices, they're actually spending more time trying to discern what they should do than it would be just to give them the resources and say, this is how we can do this. And I also knew that we had people on our team that this was their passion. And that it's okay if it's not. If we just make sure you do this, and they would just be able to run with it and to move forward. And I knew my hope, and this is where I'm not on this piece yet, but this would be very unifying for us also. So we could start to come together and talk about, it builds those relationships. Part of morning meeting is the adult also sharing about themselves while the children are sharing about themselves. And that in itself builds that sense of community that you're always looking for.
Thank you.
Yep, just one comment. So just generally speaking, like taking a look at the actions currently is a very broad, right, school focus, right? Which
Sure.
I greatly appreciate because I think it's that having that consistency from kindergarten through fourth and at some point in time fifth will like it provides like it makes the learning individualized, right? Like this is standard structure, things that will be standard across every single classroom, recognizing that inside of each one of those tests is a child who has different needs, right? You have to get past the seeing the forest for the trees, right? So if like you get the higher level, more organizational or systematic changes implemented, then you can really focus on the learning and not trying to figure out which teacher is doing morning meetings, how are they doing it, how does that change from classroom to classroom, but also from third to fourth grade when a student was used to doing something different beforehand. So just a comment about the fact that this is very, very structural. And I think that's definitely a great start for this, like, overall, next step. It's good.
Thank you for the look on your face, that I'm gonna remember that in the hard times. Seriously, like it's very, thank you, I'm taking that in.
Just overall systems person, right? So
Yeah.
just largely
For
being
sure.
able to kind of have standard structure across the board is helpful, and it helps with student belonging, et cetera. Everybody's getting the same, similar, I want to say same or similar type of experience.
In my language, for sure.
Any other questions or comments?
Ooh, year two, what a difference. This is fantastic. Thank you so much.
Right, next we are going to have Principal Robinson from Glenside Elementary School.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Cheer, cheer for Glenside.
Thank you.
Hi. It is my pleasure to share about Glenside and sort of our action plan. I'm not going to take too long, as I always say, because I think it's been it's really simple, I think, in terms of what we're focused on and the things that we're trying to do this year to continue to show growth for all of our students. I think one of the things that right? Yep. Okay. One of the things that I started the year in August talking to my staff about, which was we had a great conversation about 100% vision. And so we talked a lot about 100% of our scholars being on grade level in reading, in math, and around this emotional regulation, which comes directly from the CSI work and the data from the students in terms of what they would like to see changed. And so at first, folks are like 100%, like, what do you mean? Is that even possible? And I said, it's what we're striving for. Because how do we say 80%, which I think is typical of schooling, around that 80%, which 20% do we accept that they're not moving or they're not getting on grade level proficiency? So we started the year talking as a staff about 100% vision, every scholar, every day, whatever it takes. And so that mindset is what we have carried into this new year, to pull resources, get training. I have to say, central office has been amazing in terms of creating the psychological safety and trust that we need to ask for help, to come in and provide training and support. And teachers I know are even calling and saying, hey, can you come talk to our team, or can you come talk to me? And so that has been amazing. And so that is part of that 100% vision. And whatever it takes, like I have a student, I need to be on grade level. What is it that I need to do to get them there? And that's every student. A sub part of that is our 90-day goal, which is that every teacher is using data to plan and implement small group instruction. And the piece that has helped with that is our schedule. I love that our schedule is spelling out for teachers, this whole group, our small group, sort of that beginning time to open the lesson, get students excited, kind of understand their ideas about what it is that they're going to learn today, what are the specific goals, how is it aligned to the standards. And so that's what we've been doing. So for ELA, we have the structured literacy approach. Last year, I spent an incredible amount of time with teachers getting them professional development around structured literacy. And so this year, we're fully implementing it with integrity and foundations and the work that we're doing with the school resources around the blueprint, the curriculum. Using data to plan for those tier 2, tier 3 targeted instruction, understanding what we now know as the diamond, right? And just sort of building out this middle group. What you'll find in my data this year, which was really interesting, was this bubble group, right? That was like right there and could have had like a significant impact, especially as it relates to math, my fourth grade math. Like there was it was like 20–30% that was at this basic level that with, that could be there. We could have easily been at 70–75%, in math. So how we are looking at data, using that data to form our small groups, progress monitoring along the way, and moving students out to work on that next skill. That's the goal. 90 days, every teacher in the building. And so teaching, working with teachers to like, where are you collecting this data? How are you using it for tomorrow's instruction? How are you building out your unit plans? Those are the things that we are planning to do to move our data along. My teachers are doing an excellent job of collaborating. I love that we have aligned our stipend positions to align it to our strategic plan. And so leveraging teacher expertise. We talked last week in CIPD about the enormous amount of expertise our teachers hold. And so leveraging those expertise, having them participate in professional development, supporting each other in sort of that peer work and conversation is been amazing. We also want to make sure that we are providing engaging and enriching experiences for students. So I love the work that our challenge program has done in terms of the projects, Choose Your Adventure, and students are making little talking robot bats and all kinds of like, STEM work, and they're really excited about that and going deeper for a longer period of time. I think it are all things that these skills are going to transfer into the other content areas. And it's really a whole school approach. So my specialists, we share the data with them. They're thinking about that literacy across all domains, thinking about math across all areas. And so they've really gotten into and are able and participating with our teachers to move to the next level. My librarian, we're talking a lot about building units for typing, how to, if you're losing points on a capital letter and punctuation, is it because you didn't know how to shift in terms of taking this test? So we're like, how do we create a unit on typing and using the functions of the computer? And so she and I are working on that together. So just everybody coming together to do whatever it takes so that they all succeed. In terms of our CSI plan, again, our team chose to focus on the feedback from students, foregrounding their concern about how they're treating each other and the interactions that they have with each other. And so we've continued our work from last year with Playworks. This year, we're going a little bit deeper, and Playworks is coming to our school. They have like a residency for 3 days, and they're now building, in terms of sustainability, they're training the students to be like play cadets. And so learning through play to learn those emotional regulation is going to be key here. We're also adopted, thanks to the Office of Student Services, second steps. So we had training in August around second steps. So teachers have done the pre-assessment, they're implementing the lessons, and then we'll evaluate at the end sort of where we are. Again, last year we started with the recess before lunch. Our numbers are just significantly down in terms of like physical aggression, how students are monitoring. I also have been really fortunate to partner with Arcadia. I mean, I have students, I know you're like, one more student. I have such great resources in the building right now. We have student teachers, and we were intentional about having at least 2 per grade so that they can talk about what they're seeing with each other. We have junior level students that come in once a week, so they will be the student teachers next year, but they come in and they're helping. We have work study students, and we've been intentional to put work study students that are majoring in education in the classroom, work study students that are doing psychology and other areas, We have them as our climate and culture, assisting us outside at recess, learning our Playworks games, leading those games, really creating the conditions for students to enjoy one another, having someone right there to push in and support if they're having an emotional breakdown. How do they name it? Once they can name the emotion that they're feeling, what tool or strategy can they use to calm down? And that is having a major impact on just the overall readiness and their mindset to be able to go back into the classrooms and learn. I rarely hear about instructional time being taken up by what happened at recess. A lot of time that stuff we can focus in on that during that lunchtime, and we have a ton of people to help, who are right there to process with our scholars. And so we're monitoring that data through our SWIFT data, teacher feedback and student feedback, and really reflection around teachers and their actions, but also the students and their actions, and then the way in which our leadership is coming around them to support them. Thank you, board and Ms. Savage and Dr. Scriven, for our culture and climate administrator, because it makes a difference. It really does make a difference in terms of me being able to focus on instruction and climate at the same time, but like just having that extra person and then the other extra people who are just kind of rallying around to like make sure that we get all of our students on where they need to be.
Thank you.
Any questions and comments? Member Williams?
Thank you. I love the 100% concept. It is very much so the mindset that I wish the state would take with the data that they showed, where students of color will never achieve the level of success that that white students or Asian students or Hawaiian students would be able to succeed. I appreciate the focus locally being on 100%, even if our friends in the state aren't going to focus on that. And then also just another thumbs up to systematic changes, that high level structural changes within the school building that provide the level of consistency to allow students to succeed, so they're not confused or thinking through what they have to do next. It's part of the culture. I've seen that in the first two presentations already. No pressure. But just for me, birthday is one border. Yeah, just some feedback there. No question. Thank you.
Let's see.
So +1 to that. And also I just really want to express appreciation for focusing on an issue that really resonated with the kids. And I think that an all hands on deck approach is really effective because it's unifying, right? Everybody's focused on the same end goal. And when the kids have expressed that same end goal, right, everybody's in it together. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Schultz?
I have a question that doesn't apply to you specifically, though I don't know who the right person is, but with this data, it's individual, we're looking at it at systems level, and these are systems level goals, but the individual students have scores of places, aspects that they've learned very well and are proficient in, and maybe where they need some extra supports. How does that get incorporated into their next educator's personalized plan for that student in any way? Or does that feed into what they would maybe be focused on from a differentiation perspective next time? Or is that more internal?
That's a good question. So all of our students actually have within PowerSchool a profile. And because those profiles are able to capture data year to year, an educator, when the student is actually assigned to their homeroom or to their classroom, for example, can go and look at all of the data that is contained in that student's profile back to when the student actually started school, for example, depending upon, the roles that we set up and the permissions that we give and so on and so forth. So what we attempt to do is to give the teacher for the student as they're rising into the next grade as much information as possible so that they can begin to actually think about how they're planning for their entire class and also for the individual students. But they have access to that through that student's actual education record.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I love how you're using your Arcadia students. And the fact that not only are you leveraging everything you can get from them, but that experience for those students is not typical. And so they're also getting way more than they would say at a different location. So I really, both sides are benefiting greatly from that experience.
Your questions and comments? Thank you, Dr. Roberts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Principal Lytle and Myers Elementary School.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Right. I'm just, I don't know. I'm very excited. I am. I'm excited about the growth of our students. I'm really excited about the growth of our teachers. I enjoy seeing everyone come to work and the kids come to school. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is just seeing people for who they are, seeing our children for who they are, and teaching them in a way that meets their needs as we scaffold them towards grade level standards and beyond. That starts with, good morning. I know your name. How are you? Talking to you in the schoolyard, and just the culture that you feel from the time the kids get off the bus or begin to greet each other in the schoolyard. It transcends what my mind is tattooed with data, and it goes into those other realms of the multiple measures such as perception and demographics and all of those other data sources to really get to the core of the child. We've seen some growth. And I'm not necessarily saying that we're at the pinnacle and we've reached that point, but as we look at year 6 for me at Myers and the relationships that we've been able to build with families, with students, and the trust that we've been able to build with teachers, it is absolutely building into a deepening of our ability to deliver instruction to our students. We're not starting at 0 each year. We're building upon a lot of those principles that we have looked at and that we've delved into together, and the support from central office, the support with instruction and coaching and MTSS, all of those things play a role in how we can help our students reach their fullest potential. The data, the numbers, I'm going to intentionally let's take a look at the numbers. They're there. They're moving in a direction that is positive, and that's not by accident. It's more than just a sweat equity of our teachers. There's an intentionality about aligning our goals and our efforts to meet the needs of the kids in a way that is data-driven, that is systematic, that is evaluative of its effectiveness, and then to relook at where we were and set new goals based upon the data that we have. So we are delving into our continuous school improvement plan. We want to do better on the PSSA. Hey, everyone knows that, but that's just one metric that we can utilize to show that students are growing. So I talk about this all the time. So if I were to get into our CSI plan is rooted, and Dr. Robinson said it very simply, it's not really that complicated. Education is filled with unfortunately, a lot of jargon and key terms that people use as buzzwords, organic or
Authentic.
Yeah, authentic. But this goes back to my appreciation for our students who are excelling at the opportunities that we intentionally create for them in order to excel, and to our teachers who are being very intentional in their planning, and our emphasis is on small group instruction. This is something that we've said and that we've grown, and we've dated small group instruction for a few years now, and each year the relationship is getting deeper and more meaningful. But as we talk about small group instruction, thinking about our demographics, our school processes, the perception data, our student learning data, there is a intentionality that we have tried to put in place to meet all of our learners. And if we look at demographics alone of our special education numbers, if we look at our number of ELL students that went from 4 or 2 in 2021 to now we're up to 26. just in a few years. If we look at the number of our students that are performing on or above grade level, and that's increasing as we deepen our instruction, and we look at the number of students who have been identified for gifted instruction, we need to meet all of those needs. And that's something that we want to happen at its core in the regular education classroom setting. That instruction should be rich enough in and of itself, and that everything else is a supplement or an addition. So we've approached small group instruction at that classroom level, and we've been very intentional about having that gifted instruction teacher, the special education teacher, the speech and language teacher, that collaborative process of planning, of knowing the student's data and using that to drive instruction in a cohesive way. We're seeing that yield great outcomes for our children. At this point, it is one of the things that I've been working on, and I've talked to Mr. Whiting about it, is how we can, for example, deepen the impact of our gifted instruction in the regular education classroom setting, not just during pull-out when. And what does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that collaboration between the regular education classroom teacher and the gifted teacher look like? How does scaffolding or increasing the rigor or difficulty of the standard or the skill that the teacher in the regular education classroom is doing, and doing that with students that are already excelling and have already mastered? What does that look like? In addition to, we're going to do this project-based learning on the parts of the body. So we want to deepen all aspects of learning through small group instruction. So I'm very proud of the efforts that we are endeavoring to kind of enrich our instruction in those areas. And as Dr. Ms. Savage says, rigor is love. And as Dr. Pimental says, he's helped me to understand that knowing our students includes not just their data, but their personalities and all the other aspects of the child. And using that to, as I said, make sure that the instruction that is taking place in the regular education classroom and across the classroom settings as relates to small group instruction is intentional, that it's meaningful, that it's rich, engaging, and that it's inclusive. Another example would be how we are utilizing our regular education classroom setting to be fully inclusive of our autistic support students. And as we delve deeper into small group instruction and being more intentional about using data, getting past the organic or the authentic word of inclusion, and what does that really look like as they come into the classroom and engage in things beyond morning meeting, because their abilities are far greater than what people might think. So
You forgot to start your class.
okay, so when we delve into small group instruction, we want to be systematic in it. And like I said, we're not starting from scratch with this at Myers. We are considering students' learning styles. We are considering various various data from various assessments that are valid. And we are considering what it might take for a teacher to be able to digest and utilize that data. We are coming up with systematic ways to monitor progress towards a standard or skill mastery. A lot of these things are things that seem commonplace, but there's a lot of nurturing, a lot of development, a lot of coaching, and a lot of trust that is needed between the teacher and administrator as the instructional leader to kind of develop these skills, which will all translate to students. I'm seeing across the board in my school a much richer and a much more intentional aim as relates to planning lessons. Go Myers. I can see and feel the planning when I walk in the room. I can hear the planning in the students' responses. I can hear the planning as it relates to the questions that the students are asking, or the wait time that's there, and the opportunities that are given to students to think, digest, process, to comment on each other's answers. And that's translating into small group instruction. I'm just very appreciative of even of the changes in our schedule that the teachers are really buying into as it relates to the literacy block with Hagerty or with foundations, especially with the small group instruction that's aligned from school to school, and then how those small group instruction norms that we are creating translate not just into the win period, but in the reading block and into the math block. So we really want to reach all of those learners A healthy part of that is the MTSS process. And Dr. Robinson talked about the MTSS Diamond, and central office did a wonderful job. Kudos to Ms. Ferrero for coming over and just kind of enlightening our teachers, because it all goes back to small group instruction. Who is the child? What do they need? How do I know they need it? How do I know when they learned it? And what opportunities can I create for them to demonstrate and show? So as we talk about MTSS, and everyone is in MTSS, you're at some stage of MTSS, and just that mind shift was really critical in our teachers as it relates to planning and structuring opportunities for our students to engage more meaningfully with content. If I'm using that data that I have to structure small group learning opportunities for my students that is based upon their strengths, their personalities, their likes, their dislikes, their areas of needed growth, it's meaningful. One of my secret offices happens to be in Mr. Osea, who was our gifted teacher, in the back of his room. And I'll sit there and I'll just, I like to be around the kids. I'll just do my work there. So listening to Ida, there's about 6 or 7 other kids there, how they are just processing materials and thoughts and ideas and giving opportunities instead of solving equations to create rules, for an example, as it relates to math. Instead of solving an equation, creating problems, or coming up with multiple solutions to the same problem. And all those types of things are rooted in structuring a lesson that is geared to what the students know, what they need. And I don't need you to teach me how to do addition. I already know that. So let's challenge me. So we want to reach all of those learners. And that's why we're focusing on small group instruction. If our net can reach more students and we can help more students grow, whether it be ELL, special education, Title I, whatever it might be, then all of our students will succeed because we see them, we know them, we call them by name, we know their data, we know their likes and dislikes, and we care about them. So kudos to our kids and kudos to the teachers at Myers for their continued effort. We're going to continue to grow.
Thank you.
Questions, comments?
Yeah.
It is actually, would you be willing to show the math slide a little longer, because I didn't get to, I might not have been looking close enough. Thank you, that was all. Just wanted to see those numbers. But I love everything you do, so.
You are one team that does. But you know what? The conversations, you'll notice some commonalities between the things that I'm saying and my colleagues. And that is just another area that central office and it's all coming together. I feel like a lot of the language that we're using, a lot of the areas of growth, a lot of the strategies we're seeing some continuity between our schools as our kids and our students continue to grow. So I'm really excited. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow at school.
See you. Thank you so much. And next we have Principal Taylor from Wyncote Elementary School.
Wyncote, you are the best.
I just love the saying that Wyncote. You did.
Spelling lesson embedded in it.
Can I just say, my core identity is rooted in, I went to Wyncote. I am the best and better than all the rest.
So I'm acutely aware that I'm all that's standing between us and adjourning the meeting. I'm also acutely aware of the hour and that for someone who goes to bed between 7:30 and 8, we are way past my bedtime. But I also want to talk about the really great things that are happening at Wyncote. This is the start of my 3rd year as the principal. Our tagline is a version of what you've heard before. We talk about reaching every child every day, period, and a conversation. We know that we are working very hard to build on the positive work that my predecessor set before me and that I'm building on, but that there have also emerged some clear gaps that we need to build systems around, particularly around becoming a data-driven culture. And that is really the focus of our both school-wide improvement plan that we'll talk about and our sort of grade by grade, teacher by teacher plan. It's really infusing everything we do around data and looking at points of intersection between perception, demographic, academic achievement, and school processes. We have a very strong culture built on kindness. Every day we hear in a world where you can choose to be anything. At Winco, we always choose to be kind. That has been beaten into them. It's been drummed into their heads. As kindly as we can do it. So we're getting it. They're getting it. Our PBIS data is, at the end of last year, we were at 90% of our students had 0 or 1 referral, which is pretty astounding. We're working on a culture of making all students feel valued and seen. We now have 4 sections of autistic support at Winco, which is a very heavy lift to make sure that we're seeing all children as Winco children, not as members of a special program that's housed at Winco. Those students are our students. And that presents a challenge at times around academic performance and behavior data, but we are managing that as best we can. So if we look at our reading data, you will see some crossover between last year's plan and this year's plan. The work that we set out to do last year, we did not fully accomplish or realize. So we have carried some of that over as we build this culture of data and data-driven instruction as to what students need. One of the things that we are really focusing on, particularly in our team meetings that we have once a week for 30 minutes, is not making the meeting so much about housekeeping issues, but making it a meaningful conversation about students and looking at data. And teachers are beginning to catch on to that. It's taken a while, but I'm determined that we're going to use that time effectively to talk about students. One of the things that we are working very hard on, which is building a culture of small group instruction, which has not typically been the model at Winco. It's been a lot of stand and deliver. I am a teacher, you are the student. I will teach, you will receive. And if you don't receive, figure it out. So we're trying very hard to work in whole group, breaking off into small group, and using our win time much more effectively than we have done in the past. We know with change theory that when a new leader comes onto the scene, that it's wise to take some time to learn the culture and climate before making changes. Even though I was at Winco for 16 years before becoming the principal, it's a different role and I'm seen differently in the community. So I wanted to be very conscious about not making any wholesale changes until I had some good anecdotal and numeric data to help support the need for change. We know that if we need to, our scores last year clearly indicate that we need to do things differently. And so the opening faculty meeting was around what is that different thing we're going to do? And we agreed with kindness that we were going to look at restructuring our win time so that it's much more data-driven and teachers can share the burden so that one teacher isn't having to have multiple groups. But if one teacher, we know numbers and operations, that fluency is a struggle for our 3rd and 4th graders in particular. Why is every teacher doing FAT fluency during win time? So let's have a fact fluency group that goes to teacher A, a problem solving group that goes to teacher B, and so on and so forth. That is a major paradigm shift for Winco. And what I'm learning is that it has to go slowly and we have to roll it out sort of piecemeal. Fourth grade really took the lead to look at the data, and they started today with rolling out flexible win groups. The kids were so excited to be going to a different classroom. Third grade is up next. We're going to start much smaller with them because the need is different with our third grade teachers, right? So we're differentiating the rollout based on not just what students need, but also what teachers need in order for the model to be successful. And our data showed, as we sort of disaggregated the data, that we have a lot of students in tier 2 that we're not addressed, that we historically have not been addressed. Our tier 1s are getting service, our tier 3s are getting specialized services, but what about tier 2? So as our teachers develop their student learning outcomes this year, students performance measures, I guess is what we're calling it now, SPM, LMNOP, QRS, whatever you want to call it. They are focusing intentionally on the tier 2 students in their classroom. So that is going to hopefully help move those students in a positive direction as well. So that's sort of the global picture. When we look at the math data, one of the things that, again, targeted intervention around fact fluency, that's our math interventionist has created a Winco game room so that as students master their facts, which are, the criteria is different for each grade level. Once they reach that goal, the second early dismissal Wednesday of the week, they get to go to the game room. And there is some heavy but friendly and kind competition going on, particularly with our fourth graders about, I bet I'll get to the game room before you get to the game room. And students that have struggled historically with facts, this is the external motivating factor that's getting them to master their facts. The trick will be, can we then apply the facts? That's not today's worry. As we look at science, we have 2 teachers who were selected to attend the Steels, Summer Steels Institute at Penn State last summer. And they have come back, they drank the Kool-Aid. They are all in. Like, Jim, have you heard from Brian Reilly yet? Is he bringing over the bins for the water exercise, water experiment? Like, we'll get to it. No, we're starting tomorrow. We need them. Okie doke. And Dr. Reilly came forth with the buckets, with the bins for the water. Those 2 teachers are actually off or at Penn State tonight, tomorrow, and Thursday for the sustainability conference. So God only knows what they're going to come back with on Friday with that. So we're excited about that initiative. Over the summer, as we gathered a team to look at what our goal was going to be, we looked at, again, the intersectionality between perception data, academic data, and demographic data, and process data. And what we saw was that we really lacked clear, specific interventions, both academically and behaviorally, for our tier 2 students. And that, in large measure, is what is holding them back. So the vision of our change reality is that we will have curriculum resources that will be culturally relevant, and representative. Instruction will become increasingly scaffolded and differentiated. Assessments will be ongoing and quantifiable, and that the environment will be inclusive and respectful. How are we going to do that? A lot of positive thinking to start with, but also looking at a targeted group, right? We can't do it all today. What we looked at in our perception data was, our boys really feel like they do not have voice and choice in what they are reading. They do not see themselves as readers. And so the target became to look at the 19 students who are below basic in reading, who are now in 4th grade, looking at ways to help them see themselves as readers by providing targeted interventions based on interest and cultural relevance. So many of our boys do not see themselves reflected in literature that we're reading, both in our primary resources, curriculum resources in the classroom, and the thought of picking up a book for pleasure is not something that is a natural response for them because they don't see themselves. So how do we create reading groups, a small reading group that is meaningful, that gives them voice and choice in what they're reading? So doing some student interest surveys are critical so that teachers can pull resources or make resources available or guide them to resources or literature that they might be interested in. And that obviously ties back to looking at our common assessment data, looking at our FastBridge screener, which is new this year to create meaningful groups. I will say that is very much a growing edge for me to learn the new system, how to pull the data. We're working on that. We're working on that. So the thing I love about this plan is that it's not just a plan designed for our students to achieve. It's designed to help our teachers change their thinking, and it's a design to help me improve as a school leader as well, to support teachers in the process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Comments and questions?
I just, first of all, thank you. I appreciate all of this information, and I love what I'm hearing about the flexibility, just increased flexibility. Like that felt to me like a theme in wing groups and in the way that teachers are approaching different challenges. So that's exciting. And I love to hear about the enthusiasm that teachers come back with. And I'm wondering if those teachers can share that with teachers at our other elementary schools to spread that excitement and enthusiasm and also just turn some of it around, you know, to make the most of what they're getting from Penn State. So.
And that's one of the things we've talked about both at the principal level and through central office, is that while we have strong leadership and multiple gifts in this room, we don't have a lot of numbers, right? So to be able to empower our teachers to have that voice, that leadership voice, and to say, I can do this for my building, but I can also do it district-wide, is part of what we're building.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Other comments and questions?
Excited to hear about,
Should have stood up when
taking
it-
mostly just compliment. No, excited to hear, you know, a different way to use WIN and for lack of, like, shaking it up a little bit, because if it's not what, stands for what I need, and if individual students aren't getting what they need, then it's a lost period of time. So excited for that, and I think I am not surprised that all of those fourth graders were super excited to go to a new classroom switch, because that is exciting. And so happy to hear that. And like the specific goal that you share with us tonight is, it's just so, I guess it's like drilled down to such a specific, and knowing that every goal will not be like this, but sometimes like these will be our goals, is like we have found this very specific targeted group that needs that extra level of attention. So I'm looking forward to see, with all of this intentionality, what the outcomes are and how it goes for you all.
I think what we're looking forward to seeing too is if we can change the outcome in a positive way, what are we doing? And what lessons can we generalize to other disaggregated groups that might need tweaking for that group, but might be a foundation that I can
kind of build a platform,
Right.
Whatever. But yeah, one goal at a time, or one
goal at a time.
Thank you.
Yeah, comments?
One butter at this upper.
Stand back.
Not fine.
It's a really big picture question. Kind of around the multiple measures, the framework. Am I correct in, I guess, I hate to make assumptions, but am I hearing it correctly that part of this is to identify strategies? Part of it is to actually challenge mindsets?
Yes. I'll own that. I don't need it. I mean, I think, and I have, again, I'm coming into the district and I'm listening, and I'm also coming across excellent administrators and fantastic teachers, and I'm hearing them say that we have everything that we need in the district and in the room, but there's something that's not happening in the translation. And I'm wondering what that mindset piece is that we have to adjust and address. And we continue to dig deeper to kind of really figure out what the root causes of the barriers that we're seeing are in terms of moving certain demographic groups to achievement. Because when you look at our disaggregated data, our data reflects what the state has already put forward in terms of differences in our targets for our different demographic groups. And a lot of that has to do with United States history, mindset, systemic racism, institutionalized racism. But it also has to do with, I think, and I feel when I'm starting to diagnose, lost trust and not recognizing that sometimes people feel they need permission to do good things for kids. And I am hopeful that our new mindset and our new way of thinking about how we're doing school improvement gives people that permission. Because there's great ideas. And there is, we want to change negative mindset, but we also want to promote positive mindset. And that is where I would like to put time and effort.
Smaller.
Sorry. I just wanted to say, this almost piggybacks a little bit on what Savage just said, is that I heard every single principal tonight talk about the relationship that they have with central administrators and staff and the support that they're getting. So I wanted to say thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you to all of our administrators and support staff, whether they're here or not with us tonight, because clearly the relationship, the trust is there, and we are, all learning from each other, working together well, and I really love hearing that. So thank you to all of you for that.
Any other comments? I've got one comment before we open it up to the public. What I heard from all of our administrators, so Mr. Shelley, not just for you, but thank you for being on the team. Appreciate it. I'm hearing a systems approach to schools and schooling in both identifying the gaps within the schools as they exist, and also in identifying the solutions that need to be proposed within these environments. I hear across all of these presentations I heard about, there's growing focus on embedding and growing MTSS within each of these places, as we're all at kind of different places in our implementation and thinking around what that looks like in schools. I also heard from everybody a focus on data-driven decision-making, both at the school level and at the individual student level, when you're thinking about what's going to happen, and then training teachers so that they can use that data more readily in classrooms. I also heard a focus on social, emotional, and mental well-being, which is critical to removing barriers to academic engagement in the classroom, just so kids are ready to learn. And I just want to point these things out because they relate directly to our pillars in our strategic plan. They relate to climate and culture for student success, teaching and learning, social, emotional, mental well-being, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. And so even though we didn't name those things specifically throughout the presentations, we heard them entirely throughout the night. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to the administrators who are here tonight for thinking so thoughtfully and critically about our schools and our students and making sure that they are getting what they need. I know you're spending a lot of time here, and that's all I'll say. At this point, I will open it up to public comment. If anybody would like to say a comment or a question, please identify your location within the township and state your name. I don't think there are any comments online, correct?
There are not.
Okay. Ms. Savage, anything else?
No, that is it for this evening, and we look forward to joining you again in November.
Thank you so much. At this point, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Meeting is adjourned.
Thanks.